Hey everyone, welcome to the next public release of Japanese Phonetics by Dogen. Another one of my patrons very graciously came forward and said, "Hey Dogen, this introduction to Japanese pitch accent lesson from your Japanese phonetics series on Patreon, I think all Japanese learners would really benefit from being able to watch this. Would you mind releasing it to the public if I paid you like other patrons have in the past?" And I said, "Yeah, for sure, let's do it." So here we are. Again, this is the introduction to Japanese pitch accent episode. I made a video in the past. I think it's like a Japanese pitch accent in 10 minutes. This is kind of the fleshed out proper version of that lesson with super high quality native recordings, as well as kind of, good to be aware of points when it comes to the 4 Japanese pitch accent patterns, as well as, the 2 basic Japanese pitch accent rules that I cover at the beginning of the lesson. So in previous public releases, I've done additional commentary from my desk setup like this. And this is typically because there's a fair number of things that I've learned about Japanese phonetics or that particular topic since creating the original video years ago. But this lesson is actually, it's a ground up remake of the original lesson that I made, I want to say like maybe 4 years ago at this point. So this remake I made perhaps a year ago or so. It's much more recent, and I took a lot of time with the script to try and, eliminate the need to add in additional commentary later. So I'm just going to leave it as is. But thank you very much to Mariano for your payment and for allowing me to release this lesson to the public. I think that a lot of people will be able to benefit from this lesson because, again, it is kind of the introduction to Japanese pitch accent lesson. And in that sense, despite the fact that this is only, a 15, 20-minute lesson, it really, really will make a massive impact on your Japanese, especially if you watch this towards before getting really started with your Japanese studies. It'll still certainly help if you're 3, 4, 5, even 10 years in, but it helps even more if you watch it before developing bad habits. So hopefully this will save some Japanese learners. And if you've already started learning Japanese, it's never too late to start. I want to say 2 or 3 years, if not more, into my Japanese studies before I learned anything about pitch accent. So it's never too late to improve. I think that's probably good for an intro though. So let's just get into the lesson now. Hi everyone, and welcome to the 6th episode of Japanese Phonetics by Dogen. In this lesson, I would like to introduce the 2 basic Japanese pitch accent rules, as well as the 4 fundamental Japanese pitch accent patterns. Let's get straight into it. Rule number 1. The pitch of the first and second mora of every single standalone word is always different. Thus, any word that starts with a low pitch immediately rises in pitch, and any word that starts with a high pitch immediately drops in pitch. Let's look at a few examples of this rule now.
花、花、花。電気、電気、電気。お菓子、お菓子、お菓子。男、男、男。学生、学生、学生。
Again, no standalone word in Japanese will ever start with 2 consecutive low or 2 consecutive high mora. Any word that starts low immediately goes high, and any word that starts high immediately goes low. All right, rule number 2. If a standalone word experiences a downstep or drop in pitch, then the pitch will never go back up within that word. Thus, in terms of acceptable pitch accent patterns in Japanese, low to high is okay, high to low is okay, low, high, low is okay, but high, low, high is not. At the individual word level, the high, low, high pitch pattern doesn't exist in Japanese. Let's look at a few examples of this rule now using the words that we just saw, this time attaching the particle ga to the end of each word. Again, notice how low, high, low exists, but high, low, high does not.
花が、花が、花が。電気が、 電気が、電気が、お菓子が、お菓子が、お菓子が、男が、男が、男が、学生が、学生が、学生が。
Again, at the individual word level, if a downstep or drop in pitch occurs, then the pitch will never go back up within that word. In other words, at the individual word level, once a downstep occurs, pitch stays low. Okay, now what you've been waiting for, the 4 fundamental Japanese pitch accent patterns. Up until now, we've been saying high to low, low, high, low, etc. to generally talk about the various pitch accent patterns that exist in Japanese, but from this point forward, we're going to be using the actual specific Japanese terms and breaking down each of them in detail. And we'll be starting with the atamadaka, or head-high pattern. In this pattern, the pitch of the word's first mora is high, and the pitch of all remaining mora, including the particle, are low. Here are some native recordings of words that use the atamadaka pattern.
目が、目が、目が、春が、春が、春が、電気が、電気が、電気が、世界が、世界が、世界が、挨拶が、挨拶が、挨拶が、スーパーが、スーパーが、スーパーが。
If we tried to say the English words America is using the atamadaka pitch accent pattern, pretending that the word is a particle, then it would sound something like this.
America is. America is. America is. America is.
In my opinion, atamadaka is the easiest pitch accent pattern for native English speakers to mimic, as there are many words in English, such as the word English, that start with a relatively high pitch and then drop, again, as in English. That said, English is a stress accent language, so in English, accented syllables tend to be significantly louder and longer than the surrounding syllables, as in English, so it's difficult to make a direct comparison. The atamadaka pattern is indicated by a number 1 in Japanese to Japanese dictionaries. More on this in Lesson 7. Okay, pitch accent pattern number 2, nakadaka, or middle high. In this pattern, the word's first mora has a low pitch, the second mora has a high pitch, and then somewhere in the word, a downstep or drop in pitch occurs. Particles will always attach low. Examples.
日本が、日本が、日本が、おにぎりが、おにぎりが、おにぎりが、アパートが、アパートが、アパートが、納豆が、納豆が、納豆が、コーヒーが、コーヒーが、コーヒーが、日本人が、日本人が、日本人が。
If we use America is again, we can create 2 nakadaka pronunciations of this word set. One with the downstep on the second mora, as in
America is. America is. America is. America is.
And another pronunciation with the downstep on the third mora, as in
America is. America is. America is. America is.
Now, it's important to note that although we just created two nakaraka pronunciations of America is, essentially all nakaraka words only have one correct pitch accent pattern. So rice balls or
おにぎりが
is always pronounced with this pitch accent pattern and never with this pitch accent pattern, even though both of these are nakaraka pitch accent patterns as a downstep is occurring somewhere in the middle of the word. Again, individual nakaraka words almost always have only one correct pitch accent pattern. In some words like rice balls,
おにぎりが
this downstep occurs almost immediately, but in other words like Japanese people,
日本人が
this downstep occurs towards the end of the word. Native English speakers typically don't have too much trouble with the nakaraka pattern, as again, there are many English words, such as America, that have a bump in pitch in the middle of the word. Remember, however, that English accents are louder and longer than Japanese accents, as in America. So again, it's difficult to make a direct comparison. I'll be explaining how nakaraka words are indicated in Japanese to Japanese dictionaries in Lesson 7. Okay, pitch accent pattern number 3, odaka or tail high. In this pattern, the word's first mora has a low pitch, the second mora has a high pitch, and all remaining mora within the word have a high pitch. However, the particle then attaches with a low pitch. Examples.
花が花が花が男が男が男が女が女が女が言葉が言葉が言葉が弟が弟が弟が妹が妹が妹が
If we said our phrase, America is, with the odaka pattern, it would sound something like this.
America is. America is. America is. America is.
I personally believe that odaka is the most difficult pattern for native English speakers to mimic, as there's really nothing like it in English. Thus, if you are a native English speaker just getting started with your pitch accent studies, then I would highly suggest watching the previous native recording section of this lesson with the odaka words on repeat multiple times a day for at least a couple weeks, or until you feel like you're really starting to internalize the odaka pattern. Like the nakaraka pattern, I'll be explaining how odaka words are indicated in Japanese to Japanese dictionaries in Lesson 7. And that leaves us with the final pitch accent pattern, hebang, or flat/monotone. In this pattern, the word's first mora has a low pitch, and all remaining mora in the word and the following particle have a high pitch. That said, the rise in pitch at the beginning of the word is usually quite gentle, even though standard binary pitch accent graphics like this can make it look quite dramatic. I'll talk more about why we're using binary pitch accent graphics in this series in episode 6.3. For now, just know that the initial rise in pitch in hebang words typically isn't very dramatic, and that because of this, hebang words often exhibit very little change in pitch in actual everyday speech. This, of course, is why they're called hebang or flat/monotone. Examples.
かが、かが、かが、国が、国が、国が、会社が、会社が、会社が、学生が、学生が、学生が、アメリカが、アメリカが、アメリカが、日本語が、日本語が、日本語が。
If we say our America is word set with the he bomb pattern, it would sound something like this.
America is, America is, America is, America is.
The he bomb pattern is often difficult for native English speakers to mimic at first because we're used to words having some kind of accent, but most people sort of wake up to this pattern after realizing that it's quite monotone or even, in some circumstances, robot-like. As in, again,
America is, America is, アメリカが、アメリカが。
Heibon words are indicated in Japanese to Japanese dictionaries with a 0. So, otamadaka, nakadaka, odaka, and heibon. At this point, it may be worth mentioning that many pitch accent resources use the term kifukushiki to group the otamadaka, nakadaka, and odaka patterns into a patterns with down steps group, but we don't need to worry about this term, kifukushiki, just yet. Okay, so now we have a basic understanding of the 4 Japanese pitch accent patterns. What's next? Phonetic awareness. Now that we know that these 4 pitch accent patterns exist in Japanese, we have to start actively listening for them in speech. Over time, this active listening process will develop our ability to discern and thus mimic each of these patterns in a natural way. Once again, the 4 Japanese pitch accent patterns are atamadaka, or head high, as in
世界が、世界が、世界が。
nakadaka, or middle high, as in
日本が、日本が、日本が。
odaka, or tail high, as in
言葉が、言葉が、言葉が。
and heibang, or flat/monotone, as in
学生が、学生が、学生が。
Alright guys, that's all for this episode. I hope that you found it useful. For more information about the next release of Japanese phonetics, as well as some additional relevant updates, please... So again, I hope that you guys enjoyed the lesson, the Introduction to Japanese Pitch Accent. One of the most common questions that I get after I tell someone about Japanese pitch accent and I kind of explain the basics to them is, wait a second, do I now have to look up the pitch accent for every single word in Japanese? If I don't do that, will I sound foreign? And, well, the answer is yes and no, in the sense that you will sound foreign the more that your pitch accent is off in Japanese. But the good news is that there are dozens and dozens of rules, and this is what I cover on my Patreon series, that you can use to automatically know the pitch accent for tens and sometimes hundreds of different words just by memorizing like a short, concise rule. Another topic that I recently covered in detail in my series was how the typical Japanese voice and speaking style is different from that of the typical native English speaker and their speaking style. If you maybe watch a lot of anime, or even if you watch a lot of Japanese TV shows, you might have always kind of noticed, like, it's not just that there's pitch accent differences and there's pronunciation differences, but like the voice itself is kind of different altogether. So I tried to break that topic down in a very practical way with a native speaker who went to the NHK Academy. I did several interviews with her and basically used all the information from those interviews in that particular video. So I think it'll probably be useful for a lot of people, but I'm kind of going on a tangent here, so I'll just try and end things here. Again, this is the kind of additional stuff that I cover on my Patreon. Hope that you guys maybe consider signing up. If not, that's cool too. Thank you all for your continued support, and I'll talk to you guys again soon. Sayonara.